Whoa, time for guest hosts. Whoa, it's time for guest hosts. Whoa, love the guest hosts. I just want a guest host. It's episode 10 of Guest Host Raw, the series where I review every episode of the guest host era of Monday Night Raw. A couple of quick things I want to get out of the way. First of all, yes, I got rid of the mustache. I know some of you are sad about that, but don't worry. You have one more chance to see it in action in my video I'm dropping later this week of Starrcade 99. But yeah, this is 10 episodes of Guest Host Raw. Whoever thought we'd reach this far after suffering the lows of ZZ Top and Jeremy Piven and Floyd Mayweather? Who thought I would get to 10 honkin' episodes of this with so many more to go? It's been really interesting to look back in this phase. And I know the longer I've been doing it, I've been having more people commenting and asking, Brian, why are you covering this? You shouldn't cover this because it's so bad. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. That is why I am going through this. That's why this channel is called Wrestling with Regret, because I want to look at the bad stuff. And I have been wanting to dive into the guest host era forever. And this has been, to me, a great way to do it. It's been hilarious to go back and look at this time period. I think it's a great leveling sort of time period, because if you're a fan of today where you think, wow, WWE is the be-all, end-all, and they just can't do wrong, wow, they're so great, then watching this and being reminded of this might humble you. But if you're somebody who hates WWE now and like, wow, like it's the worst it's ever been in 2025, it's the worst booking ever, no, you can always be reminded it can always be worse. And that's why this series exists. People need to remember this time period because it just needs to be something we can all look at for perspective. And lastly, 10 episodes in, a lot of you have been asking, Brian, how are you able to even watch these episodes of Raw? Because, you know, the WWE Network is no more. These episodes aren't on Netflix, so like, how are you able to see these? Well, I can't tell you exactly where I'm watching these Raws, but I will say to find the treasure you're seeking, you might have to sail out into some uncharted or international waters. Arr! But let's begin this episode of Raw from August 31st, 2009 at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. It's a building that's just rich in WWE memories. Like, I remember hearing that name of the arena as far back as '98. A lot of cool things have happened in this building. But we begin right away with the guest host for the week, the American Dream, the son of a plumber, the Hall of Famer, Dusty Rhodes Daddy, making his way to the ring, gets a nice response. And here's a guy who has, you know, authority experience. You know, he's been an on-air authority figure in WCW, and I don't think he's there with NXT yet, but he will be eventually. But, you know, he definitely has that gravitas. He has that experience. So he's on stage, he's dancing, he just keeps on dancing like, come on, man, time to make your way down to the ramp. I feel like they cut away to the announcers so like a stagehand can usher him down the ramp to get on with it. So Dusty's in the ring with the microphone and he starts off by saying, we be working on some night moves tonight, baby. He does a lot of dancing sporadically throughout this promo, but he talks about how, 2 years ago, just down the road, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And he talks about, what else he's proud of. He says, I'm proud of my son, Cody Rhodes. I know. Like, he's already kind of defending himself because he's getting booed at the mention of Cody. But he says, I know that sometimes they get that trifling attitude when it comes to joining Randy Orton and the legacy, but I'm hoping that I can get him to see the light, Daddy. And so he says he's going to give his son an opportunity because he says there's nothing a father wouldn't do for his son. And so he makes a match putting Cody Rhodes against Randy Orton for the WWE Championship later on tonight. Not only that, Dusty says he's going to be in his son's corner. And not only that, he says, I'm tired. And so he goes to the corner to rest for all of 2 seconds before he gets back up and starts walking again. He says the special guest referee is going to be John Cena. Like, wow, what a happy night this is going to be. And everybody in the crowd tonight, Daddy, you get a puppy. Go on outside after the show and pick up your puppy, Daddy. way. But not so fast, because Randy Orton's music plays and the champion makes his way down the ramp looking the same way he always does. I can't tell if he's angry or if he's just thinking really hard about things or what, but when I see Orton and Rhodes together in the ring, I do think about the Great American Bash from a couple years prior, that bull rope match they had, and that was the origin of Cody Rhodes, in WWE on the main roster. And Randy's got the mic and he says, "I think it's obvious that you're jealous of me, and you're jealous because your son Cody looks up to me more than he looks up to his actual father, and you're trying to make up for your shortcomings as a father by gifting him this championship match, which is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen, the most shameless thing." And he goes, "What makes you think that Cody will even accept this matchup?" And Dusty basically kind of goes into a little rant, and he says, Cody is hungrier than you, and he's athletically gifted, and I'm going to raise his hand when he's the new WWE champion. That's what I think, Daddy. So Orton's like, "Give me one good reason that I shouldn't kick you in the skull like I did 2 years ago." And then we hear the legacy music play. Cody Rhodes makes his way out now, and Dusty makes his face kind of like, when the music is playing. That made me laugh. So Cody makes his way down to the ring, and he says, "The man you kicked in the head 2 years ago, this man does happen to be my father. Randy, you and I are associates. Dare I say we're even friends, but I'd be foolish to pass up this golden opportunity. I want to become the youngest WWE champion like you were, and it's not personal, it's business." And so Randy goes, "I guess the fix is in." And Dusty says, "You're right, Daddy, the fix is in, baby." And then we hear the Raw theme play to close us out. And this is very interesting. There's a lot of parallels to this episode and when Ted DiBiase was the host many weeks ago, where you've got the father of one of the members of Legacy coming in and throwing a wrench in the works with the group. And so we're kind of returning to that storyline, it seems, here. And so you wonder how it's all going to play out. It seems too good to be true that Dusty is just gifting Cody all this stuff at the expense of Orton ahead of the pay-per-view. Something feels amiss here. Just before commercial, we get this shot backstage of a referee explaining in the simplest possible terms the rules of a battle royal to these 6 lady wrestlers who I guess have never witnessed or been in a battle royal before in their lives. I don't know. And then we come back from break and we get our first matchup. It's an American Dream 6 Diva Battle Royal. Wow, such innovative matchmaking from the guy who brought us War Games and the Bunkhouse Brawl, etc., etc. You know who I want to see as a guest host for Monday Night Raw? Somebody like Guillermo del Toro or David Lynch. See what those visionaries could do with the roster they have, because like I said before, all these guest hosts have the same toys every week, and they just put them all in the same situations. It's name of the host plus women's match, and then the writers are like, "Wow, let's go on break, guys. We earned our money for the week." But anyway, the winner of the Battle Royal gets a Divas title shot later in the evening. So kind of a nice quick turnaround there. I like that. So the people in the match are Gail Kim, Beth Phoenix, Kelly Kelly, Rosa Mendez, Alicia Fox, and Jillian Hall. And they point out that Alicia did pin the Divas champion last week. Also, this has got to be the first match we've seen Jillian Hall in I think it's for the first time in the course of this series, we've seen Jillian Hall in the ring wrestling in a match. No over-the-top rope rules for this one. It's through the ropes and hitting the floor to get out. Beth eliminates Rosa pretty early on, has no patience for her, I guess, former ally, I'm not sure. We get a nice axe kick from Alicia to Kelly Kelly, but then Alicia gets eliminated. The final 3 are Gail, Beth, and Jillian, and a lot of close calls and struggling between all 3 of them. Gail finally eliminates Jillian, and Beth, who's been kind of selling in the corner for a while, she just sneaks up behind her and dumps Gail out to win the matchup. And I thought that was so weird, because if you're going to make reference to the fact that Alicia has this big win against the Divas champion, then why not have her win the Battle Royal to keep the momentum going? Or why not just have Beth pin the champion last week, which is what I said should have happened in the first place if the champ's gonna get pinned at all? You know what? If I didn't know any better, gang, I would think that these people don't know what the fuck they're doing with the women's division week to week. They show us a recap of the tag title eliminator match of sorts last episode with Jericho versus Mark Henry and MVP. And you know what? Someone in the comments section of the last edition of Guest Host Raw pointed out, why couldn't MVP have just asked Mayweather to make that a title match right then and there instead of a, wow, if we beat them here, we get a title match later on. So we get a couple of singles matches involving the champions and the challengers this week, beginning with Chris Jericho versus MVP. And get this, guys, MVP's been doing a lot of trash talking lately. He called the tag team champions Beauty and the Beast. Whoa, he went there, y'all. Jericho getting his heat early on. MVP with his first comeback. I love that little two-handed throat chop, the judo thing that he does. Jericho hits his triangle drop kick as we go to commercial break. We come back and MVP is making his comeback again. He hits his big moves. He hits the ball-in elbow. They're trading finisher attempts. Jericho ends up hitting the code breaker and kind of teases putting his feet on the ropes, but ultimately doesn't, and so just wins clean over MVP. Like, okay. I thought it was a nice match. I thought it was fine, but I think I would have liked it for Jericho to win with a little bit of heel chicanery or something. Don't just totally walk over, the guy who's trying to, look strong, or you want to look strong going into the tag title program. So we go backstage to see Dusty Rhodes in his themed office. I love how every week when they decorate the guest host's office to reflect what their vibe is. And so for Dusty, it's, you've got the saddle, you got some bales of hay, there's an oil lamp, there's some WWE propaganda hanging from the walls, and so he's looking through the rise and fall of WCW DVD, and then in come DX, who are all just kind of complaining in general about legacy and saying how Child Ted and Cody are a disgrace to their dad's names, saying this right in front of Dusty, by the way. And Dusty's like, oh, but don't worry, baby, I got influence with Cody, and so when he wins the title, I'll make sure he gives one of you guys the title match later on. I'm not sure how that exactly refutes what DX was saying about the guys, but whatever. But so Shawn and Triple H are arguing over who would get this hypothetical title shot, and then Triple H says, no need to argue in front of the Hall of Famer, let's talk about it when we get home, which gets no reaction. I think they were pausing after that to wait for a big guffaw, and that doesn't really happen, so they're just kind of standing there, and they go, well, what do we want to do now? Do you want to hang out and watch a DVD? And then they all take turns shilling DVDs, where Shawn Michaels holds up, the rise and fall of WCW DVD. And then he does this, and then Dusty Rhodes is like, buy my DVD, the Dusty Rhodes story, baby. And then Triple H comes in and cuts him off and says, you should watch the DX DVD. And so they all stand there with their big poses and cheesy grins. Shawn Michaels has stayed frozen the entire time since his line. So he was just right here while Dusty and Triple H were doing their bit. And I thought that was awesome. So they're going, okay, so should we watch one of these DVDs? Yeah, sure. And Shawn's like, shouldn't we be watching Raw? And Dusty's like, no, forget about it. I'm the host. We don't have to watch Raw. God, again, stop burying your own show. Hey, fuck this show that I'm the host of. Let's go watch this nostalgic look back at WCW, baby. But then Triple H has a weird line where he says, he can just tell us what's going to happen. We don't need to see it. Which is a weird thing to say, because I'm more of the whole giving away this is all a show and silly and whatever. So then this bit ends with Shawn looking to load the DVD up somewhere I guess in the saddle is where he's gonna try first. This is the beginning of a series of bits you're gonna see with Dusty and DX, and they do deliver. I will say that right now. But then just before break, we see Hornswoggle two-stepping his way down the hall dressed as a cowboy, and I'm like, oh no, we gotta come back to this. And sure enough, it's a Texas bull rope match as Hornswoggle takes on Chavo Guerrero. Bull rope, more like bullshit. I'm so sick of this storyline and this feud. Again, this is Dusty Rhodes we're talking about, one of the most innovative matchmakers of his day. And this is his idea for what to do with Chavo and Hornswoggle. Put Chavo in a fucking bull suit, have him wear a mascot head. And by the way, the object of this Texas bull rope match is to literally tie your opponent up, evidently. And Lawler says early in the match, this is utterly ridiculous, which, okay, you got one on me, Lawler. That was actually a well-timed cow punch. So the match begins. We get like a tug of war spot with the rope. It's very goofy, very silly clown shit we are seeing here. Chavo hits this big bullish boot brother to start taking over. He's going up top when Evan Bourne shows up to distract, and that allows Hornswoggle to yoink Chavo down with the rope. So then Swoggle just walks around Chavo with the rope and does this really bad job like tying Chavo together with it. Chavo's just got his legs up and everything, and he's got to pretend he's being hogtied. And then the referee just calls the match. Hornswoggle's the winner. Hooray! But we're not done yet, because Chavo gets up, he decks Evan Bourne, he corners Hornswoggle, goes to charge him, but he runs himself into the ring post. And so then Evan helps Hornswoggle get the cow head. The music hits, and that's it. This is not funny anymore. For the love of God, how did this right here not kill the company? How did this never-ending storyline not kill the company dead? I don't understand it. Up next, it's the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. The strongest man alive versus the largest athlete alive. Mark Henry versus The Big Show. It's the second half of the tag title preview that we're getting this week. And this is just, a big, heavy matchup. They're doing the tail of the tape earlier in the evening, showing how large these men are. It's going to be a collision course. And sure enough, that's basically how they play this matchup. It's big lockups, big push-off, big lockup, big push-off. We get this test of strength, which Big Show loses. Test of strength against the world's strongest man is definitely a choice there. Show's even wearing himself out with his own headbutts, which he stopped selling after a while. Henry's got this big, long-time headlock on Show. It's going on for about a minute, and you can tell the crowd's getting a little restless by this. They do not want to see big man do slow-motion headlocks, but Show is able to wake them up by fighting out of it and hits a spear on Henry, which is actually pretty good crowd work. Get the crowd just restless enough that when you do something big, like a high spot like that, with these big dudes, it does get the crowd to wake up again. Henry trucks the Big Show, hits this splash, but it's still not enough. The Big Show gets up and pulls off the turnbuckle pad and drives Henry right into it in plain view of the referee. He gets disqualified. He's able to hit Henry with a knockout punch after the bell, but the match is already over, which it shouldn't surprise me at this point because, 10 weeks into this series, we know Big Show does not know how the rules work anymore and just gets himself disqualified for very stupid reasons. At least there's a small comfort in knowing that a couple of years after this, when they run this angle back, Show versus Henry, it does get a lot more interesting. Backstage in the Legacy, we see Child Ted and Cody having a chat where Cody says he's ready to face Orton. Then Randy Orton walks in and kind of, again, asks him if he's really ready to go through with this and says that no matter what happens in the ring, it's not personal, it's just business. And more tense looks are exchanged as we build this potential descent in the Legacy. And then we go elsewhere backstage where the first thing we see is a big old picture of Hulk Hogan. Oh my God, what's he doing here? Oh, but they're actually watching the finger poke of doom on the the Rise and Fall of WCW DVD. And there you see it's Dusty and DX watching it, and Dusty's just like, boy, I was the rise of WCW, and those two assholes, baby, those was the fall, baby. And then they start having this debate about the Monday Night Wars where Shawn's like, how could you have let this happen? And Dusty's like, I didn't let this happen, baby. Your friend Big Sexy was in charge during this time. And then Triple H is like, well, if we were there, we wouldn't have let him get out of control. And then Dusty's like, oh yeah, from 96 to 98, WCW whooped that WWE booty. And by the way, Shawn, what years were you champion again? And Shawn's like, 96 to 98. Wow, that's just calling him out right there. It's wow, you were the champion during this time when WCW was kicking ass. And so then they're like, okay, but that's fine because, after WrestleMania, man, the WWF really fought back and kicked WCW's ass. And then Dusty's like, and when were you injured and went off for 4 years, daddy? And Shawn's like, after WrestleMania in 1998. And then he gets all mad in a huff and leaves. And the H-Man's just like, he's still mad that he wasn't part of the Attitude Era. By the way, who's the idiot who took a no-talent schmuck like Mark Marrow and painted him up like Little Richard? And then Dusty's like, that was me, daddy. And then I can't believe, why'd Mark Marrow catch a stray here? He did nothing wrong. And so then Shawn comes back and he's ranting and raving how he wasn't part of the Attitude Era, even though he came up with the idea, and he walks off. stuff. Like, whoa, everyone's just getting called out for stuff this week. Oh, mind you, no one's bringing up like Terra Rising or, Jean-Paul Levesque in WCW. No one's making fun of a certain person's past in WCW either, but let's make fun of Johnny B. Bad. Like, whoa, like what? You know what? I realize now it's because Martin Mero was one of the guys who spoke out against WWE after the Benoit tragedy. Up next, a fatal four-way match for the U.S. Championship as Kofi Kingston defends against Carlito, The Miz, and Jack Swagger. Okay, why is Jack Swagger in this matchup? He did not win his most recent match at SummerSlam. Why does he keep getting put in these championship matches and opportunities when he's been losing more than winning on Raw? And also, Carlito, there's some continuity there because he is having kind of a micro program with Kofi right now. The Miz is only 2 wins into his big comeback after being banned from Raw, and now he's got a U.S. title match already. Like, what kind of story mode stuff is this where you get your title matches so quickly? Right away, The Miz bails out, lets the other 3 do a lot of the work. We get this quick sequence where there's a lot of movement, and then you got Carlito getting launched out, and then The Miz, then Kofi dives onto all 3 of the opponents just before we come back from break. And during the match, Miz is very opportunistic. He's trying to capitalize on other people's hidden moves on other guys. Kofi gets on this big run, hits a diving cross body onto a couple of guys. Swagger gets a big run. We get this boom drop by Kofi onto Carlito, which reverberates onto Swagger below him. The Miz gets back in the ring, hits a skull-crushing finale onto Swagger. Carlito breaks up the pin, but then Carlito walks right into just the tip, the Trouble in Paradise, for Kofi to win and retain. This was a really entertaining matchup. I thought it was a very smart 4-way in that I think every guy in the match got their characters over. You could tell right away, the personalities and the styles of all 4 guys really well distilled into this one matchup. I think it's a really good case study of what the mid-card is looking like right now on Raw, and yeah, lots of potential there for sure. Divas Championship match next as Mickie James defends against Beth Phoenix, who won the Battle Royal earlier in the night. And this matchup is predominantly Beth. It's mostly her in this one, getting the heat on Mickie, slamming her around. Nice drop kick sending Mickie into the ring post, and Beth is just really aggressively working on Mickey's shoulder, and great selling by Mickie in this match as well, where she's barely able to move her arm at all by the end of it. But she stays really scrappy in this matchup, really good babyface, come from behind sort of thing, fighting out, getting Beth real pissed off, and ultimately it costs her. She goes for a slam, and Mickey's able to counter it into a big old DDT and pulls the upset win out of nowhere, essentially, from that one move. It was a good match, told a good story in 6 minutes or less, but again, it's just where is this gonna go? If Beth is the challenger again and she's beaten again here, then where do you go with that storyline? And again, what's the deal with Alicia Fox? We're back one more time in the Dusty Zone where they're continuing to watch the WCW DVD, and Triple H is like, "You forgot to mention the best thing of all, the Shockmaster." And Shawn's like, "I've never heard of the Shockmaster before." And then Triple H explains in very accurate, just plain detail of what the Shockmaster was all about. And he talked in this really funny voice, and then you hear Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and so who's this? Where's this voice coming from? Oh, I think it's coming from over there. And then suddenly the camera pans over to this big yellow wall and these pyro cannons on the floor, but oh man, we know it's gonna come here. So we get the flaming pyro, we get a pause, and then we see someone dressed like the Shockmaster barging through the wall, and as the guy is falling through and getting up, you can hear the dubbed voice starting to talk like he's not doing anything. "I am the Shockmaster, and I will shock you." And it's it's just so funny how he's just barreling through the line, not even waiting for the guy to finish selling, going through the wall. That was chaotic. And then they're like, "Where's that voice coming from?" Then Triple H goes, "From over there." And then once again, the camera pans over to reveal Arn Anderson, the man behind the curtain. That's a different Anderson. It was Ole Anderson originally, and now we've got Arn instead. So Arn's just like, "Sorry, Dream." He drops it and runs off. That was great. I love seeing Arn, who is always this very serious, stone-faced guy, doing a little kind of a deadpan comedy bit. That was great. That was a great use of Arn there. And so then DX basically walk away from the scene in agreement going, yeah, the Shockmaster was the worst. And then they just walk off. And then Dusty looks at the camera and goes, it should have worked. It should have worked. And then the Shockmaster takes off the Stormtrooper helmet and it's Santino Marella. Ah, he's back. And he goes, I know, I love it, the Shockmaster. And then Dusty does this big like, huh? Look in the screen, and you might as well have had a like, whop, whop, wah at the end, or like freeze frame, and you get the executive producer credit at the end. Oh my God. All these DX segments where they were burying WCW and at times burying themselves were some amazing bits. And this was the best of all. It was great. I mean, I love the revisiting of the Shockmaster, them making fun of it, the bit with Arn. It was perfect. This was a good use of everyone involved, I think. They say, did you know that Raw last week was watched by more than 2 million female viewers? Take a look at how they just fail to capitalize on that for years to come. We go back to the promo zone where Josh Matthews welcomes John Cena. This is crazy. Another week where John Cena, they don't even bring him out until like deep into the second hour, which is crazy to me. I'm surprised they don't try to get away with including him at least once in the first hour every week, even if a small thing. And so Josh asks, can we avoid another controversial decision tonight? And so Cena talks about, the implications of what would happen if he, out of vengeance, cost Randy Orton the match. Hey, it's a great moment for Cody Rhodes to become the WWE champion with his dad holding his arm up. But, the story's going to be that John Cena cost Orton. But I'm going to, try and play it down the middle, and whatever happens, happens. But he says he redirects the thing to Breaking Point. And he goes into this great speech about Breaking Point where he says, Randy Orton's going to run into a brick friggin' wall. He says, I've tasted victory. I've been stung by defeat, but I will not quit. I have been dragged down, been busted open. I will not quit. And he plays Broadway Joe, he says. He's going to guarantee victory at Breaking Point because he will not quit. It was a hell of a promo by Cena here. And again, if we see more of the serious Cena in this stage than like the goofy, haha, kid-friendly Cena, then I think we'd be having a very different discussion of like how he was treated by the fans then, as someone you could take seriously instead of somebody who plays almost everything for laughs. Main event time for the WWE Championship as Randy Orton defends against his fellow legacy stablemate in Cody Rhodes, with Cody's father Dusty in Cody's corner and the special guest referee being John Cena. So the deck seems truly stacked against the champion. Is this the night where legacy finally crumbles? Well, no, because just before the match begins, Dusty gets on the mic and reiterates what he said at the top of the show, where he says, there's nothing a father wouldn't do for his son. John, I'm sorry. And so it's a trap. Someone let Admiral Akbar know, because soon enough you've got Orton and Cody both beating up John Cena. Ted DiBiase runs in there and joins the beating. Suddenly we hear DX's music and we've got them running in to try and save the day. Triple H goes for a pedigree onto Cody, but Dusty bonks Triple H in the head with the heel of his cowboy boot. And then Shawn gets laid out and John Cena is in a heap on the ground. So all four of the guys, Legacy and Dusty Rhodes, they're in the middle of the ring. They do the big arms thing. And then all of a sudden you've got, Dusty and Cody hugging it out. Dusty turns around and walks right into an RKO from Randy Orton. So, ooh, that snake, even though Dusty helped them out and coordinated this whole attack with them, he still eats an RKO at the end. And you see Cody is just like, he is beside himself. He doesn't know how to react because he's just like, my dad. You killed him. I want to attack you, but you're my leader. But my father. And like, he's very conflicted by all this as the show fades to black. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of double swerve on that. I thought that the Legacy guys finally looking more competent and having a host that will work with them is kind of rare. I think it's the first time we've actually had that, like where a guest host, well, no, the first is Jeremy Piven, I guess. But the first one where it feels really like effective and like devastating to John Cena. I think it's kind of ironic that, you know, you had Ted DiBiase Sr. as a guest host, and he kind of played babyface, even though he was a heel for most of his active career. You got the inverse with Dusty here, where he's been a face for most of his career, but Swerve, he's actually playing a heel here in the grand scheme of things with the legacy. And we're getting more evidence built in as to why Orton is a bad leader and why Cody and Ted Jr. should break away from them, but they really drag it along here. And by the time it finally happens, it's like we get the split, but then the face heel role, that whole dynamic is really reversed. I feel the story of the friction between these guys in Legacy and Randy being this real asshole of a leader, like that can be a great story, but they just go about this in such a really weird, staggered way where, you know, we already forgot about the Ted DiBiase thing by now. We're probably gonna forget the stuff with Cody and Dusty in a few weeks. It just feels that the nature of the show and how the guest hosts operate, and the fact that we're not going to see Ted Sr. come back. We're not going to see Dusty come back for any of this. So it's like we can't sit and marinate on any of these beats that actually do matter, because we got to move right along to the next thing with the next guest host. It's a big step in the right direction from last week, which had that ridiculous opening of the half-hour segment with Vince McMahon's birthday and everything. Pretty good matches all around. I think it was a good use of DX and the special guest. You know, I thought, you know, DX, they were, I think, overexposed a bit last week. And so this week they were just kind of more in the backstage role, and they kind of played their smaller bits. And I thought they worked well with Dusty, who, as far as a host rating, I'm going to give him a 3.5 out of 5. I've said this before, former wrestlers will always be at least decent in this role because they are familiar with the environment. They know how to address a live crowd and how to beat and block and time things for wrestling. So at least they have that edge. And because Dusty has worked well as an authority figure before, I knew that was going to be fine. And I think that it's interesting that he got to play kind of two roles, because the stuff with DX was pure ha-ha comedy, and then you've got this bit with Legacy at the end where he's, you know, helping out his son, but he's being a heel in that process, but then he also gets heeled on, so like he gets the save face in the end. So I think they did a lot with Dusty in this one, and I think that his presence in the show did seriously help the episode this time, as opposed to where some guests kind of detract. My pick for the best match of the night's got to be the Fatal 4-Way for the U.S. title. It really feels like kind of the antidote to the other bad things that occur on this show, where, hey, the mid-card might not be booked perfectly right now, but we have a lot of young studs, a lot of great young talent who, some of these guys are going to be, you know, still in the company to this day. They're going to be the present and the future of the company. So it's good to see them. It's really neat to see them in this kind of early role here. And as far as the worst match of the night, it's got to go to Chavo and Hornswoggle Part A Million. I don't know how many more times they can keep this going or think it can remain funny or relevant or interesting, but they are going to beat this horse into the ground. But let's talk about the guest host rankings. 10 weeks into this show, if I were to do a top 10 best first 10 guest hosts of Monday Night Raw in the guest host era, this is what the list would look like, as I put Dusty Rhodes at number 4 on the list, just between Seth Green and Ted DiBiase Sr. His time with anything outside of the main event of DX was slim to none, but I think that he was very good and strong in the times he was on camera. And even when he played kind of an ambiguous heel, and you realize that he still had good intentions behind it, it gave him a couple of extra layers on this week's episode. But what did you think of this episode of Raw, Dusty Rhodes as the host, and how about this review? Let me know in the comments section below. Next time on Guest Host Raw, it's going to be a doozy. A lot of folks have been waiting, circling the calendar for coverage of this episode, because it is the week where Bob Barker, the legendary host of The Price is Right, is coming to Monday Night Raw to host the action. It features arguably one of the best, skits in WWE history, especially involving a guest host. I can't wait to go into further detail about it 2 weeks from now when the iconic Bob Barker invades Monday Night Raw. But until then, folks, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time right here on Guest Host Raw.